And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of stillcurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is Still Curtain contributor Shayne Kubas. Shayne, we have so much to talk about since last Wednesday's show. Russell Wilson is now on the team. That was kind of spur of the moment there. We'll talk about what that means. Let's dive right into the news today because we're going to have a full slate here. And I want to get all your opinions. And those of you joining us in the chat, I'd love to get your opinions as well. Let's talk about this, the moves that have happened to start the legal tampering period. Free agency officially opens up this afternoon as we record this. But let's talk about the things that have happened so far. And let's start with the signing of Patrick Queen. The Steelers signed linebacker Patrick Queen from free agency, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens, was a first-round pick back in 2020, made the Pro Bowl last year. Pittsburgh locked him up to a 3-year, $41 million deal, which the projection came in under expected. There were some projections out there thinking it would be in the $17 to $18 million a year range, kind of like the Tremaine Edmonds of last year's free agency. He came in at 13.2, I think it was.
Roughly,
for him, 13.6, something like that. So a little bit under that. Shayne, I know that I've seen some of your comments on this. I know you're not the biggest Patrick Queen fan, so I want to start with that, and then I'll get the rebuttal here.
Yeah, so for me, it's more about the fact that whenever we haven't seen him next to Roquan Smith, he's been one of the worst linebackers in the NFL, right? Like just straight up, his first 2 years were some of the worst that you got from the position. Now, he has a ton of talent. He has a ton of speed. His athleticism is off the charts. If you can get him in the right direction, if you can point him in the right direction, literally, like actually tell, like, this is where you need to go, do this, do that. He makes plays, right? He made a lot of plays for the Ravens the past 2 years. I just don't know whether it's Landon Roberts or if Holcomb can get back, whoever's playing next to him, I don't know if they can do the type of stuff that Smith did, because not many guys can, to kind of help him and allow him to just go make plays, to just go hunt the football, basically. I worry that he's going to regress closer to the version of himself we saw his first 2 years. Now, he's a better player now than he was then, kind of across the board. So I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as that. But this is one of those situations where I'm glad the contract is structured the way it is, because I would not be shocked if going into next season, they view him as a guy that might not be on the team past this year. Like, I actually think that's possible. And I'm not going to bet on that. His contract is friendly enough that, like, I think you could keep him even if he's not as good as he's been. But I do not expect him to remain an all-pro, Pro Bowl player for us without Roquan Smith there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to diagnose. First of all, you're not wrong. He was horrible his first couple of years in the league. Like, the guy couldn't play all the time because he was just so bad. But I think that he's coming off his best season of his career.
Yes,
it did come alongside Roquan Smith, who was maybe the second best linebacker in the league next to Fred Warner. He's a really good football player.
Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with it. And I agree with you, Shayne. I do fear that he's a lot closer to maybe a Devin White type of player.
Right.
That's kind of see it and go get it guy instead of the instincts guy like Roquan Smith. I hope that's proves to be the other way around. Yeah. One thing I will say here is Patrick Queen is still 24 years old after his rookie contract. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a grace there. I don't know how much like your instincts develop as you go on. You would think that the more you play football, the more you would understand this. But we've seen guys that kind of go their whole careers without having great instincts either.
Yeah.
I am interested to see. I don't think there's any chance he probably grades out as well of this year with the Steelers as he did last year with the Ravens. I think that situation was so good for him. Yeah. But there are a couple of interesting things with him. Like, he was, according to Next Gen Stats, he was 23rd in blitz rate, but he had like the highest pressure rate among all linebackers
for sure.
So he can certainly do that kind of stuff. And I think that's an element that he'll bring to the table there. I think what this does speak though to Shayne is Cole Holcomb is not ready to go, and nor will he be. Like, I think that this is a kind of a scary situation with him. We knew when we saw him suffer that knee injury, and then further confirmation at the NFL Combine when Omar Khan said, "Yeah, we just don't have a timetable on his return." Yeah. Not a good sign for where it stands with Holcomb's health heading into the 2024 season. I'd love to be able to see these guys play next to each other, because I know if Landon Roberts is out there, we kind of know who he is. We know what that role is. It'd be nice to have 2-3 down linebackers out there that can kind of be used interchangeably in their roles a little bit. I'm more excited about this probably than what you are, Shayne, but I'm not over the top. Like, and I
I'm
think that's the
hopeful,
reason
but
for
it's
me. Like,
yeah.
to me, this is way beyond Miles Jack. Like, well, Miles Jack was totally
Yes, yeah.
toast
Yeah,
when the
that's a
Steelers
different
signed him.
situation.
That regardless of what many fans still thought they were getting, like the drafted version of Miles Jack, we knew that wasn't going to be the case. Patrick Queen has got a lot more left in the tank than Jack does, a lot more. And so I am excited about that. I do agree with you. I think that we'll see a regression when he comes to Pittsburgh, just being in a different situation. The other factor, though, here that this kind of has me most concerned, and you talk about the way the contract is structured, I love that. You can get out of that deal
absolutely
by next year if you need to.
If
You're with the dead money, and then the following year, like almost nothing, like no ties to him after that. But the biggest reason for me, Shayne, is that is 13 point some odd millions that I can spend somewhere else. And personally, like if I could take back that move and sign a Lloyd Cushenberry, I might do that because I might rather have like I just fixed a center position or I fixed the cornerback position with a Kendall Fuller or whoever you want to name out there. I feel like those are more pressing needs. I know that linebacker is not good, especially if Holcomb's health is bad. You need to fill it. It's just a lot of money to spend on the defense. Once again, an offense that averaged 16.9 offensive points per game last year, which is abysmal. And so I hate spending more and more resources on the defense, knowing that you've got a hole at left tackle, you've got a hole at center. Now, and probably the Steelers knew then, it was already in the works, they were going to have a gaping hole at wide receiver, which we're going to talk about here in a second as well. So to me, I think it has a little bit less to do with Queen. I think that Queen is a solid player at this point. I do worry about him kind of reverting back to his old ways a little bit. And I think it has more to do with just the kind of the resources allocated. And again, I love the way the contract is structured. So no complaints there on my end. So what would you predict? Like, what do you think the Steelers are getting out of this guy? Like, if you're just kind of put it out there right now, Shayne, he's going to be a top blank linebacker in the NFL next year.
Top 25, maybe.
Okay. Like, I think that's fair.
I think the problem ultimately, Tommy, with it is that, like you said, the allocation is definitely like, I'd rather not spend $13 million on a linebacker, but I also understand with Holcomb's injury, they kind of were forced into this. Most likely this wasn't something they could just not address. I also just like literally every other linebacker that got signed on Monday better than him. Just literally every single one of them. Yeah, especially for the price, because all of them were less expensive. Now, granted, the structure might have needed to be different. Maybe you had to spend more overall like cap on them to get them signed, whatever. But he wasn't the best linebacker signed, and he got the most money. Like, that is something you have to think about, in my opinion. So you hope that he can be closer to the version of himself he was this year for us. I do think he's going to be somewhere in between the like maybe worst linebacker playing and one of the better ones, probably smack dab in the middle. And maybe that's all they need out of it, right? Like, maybe that's good enough for them to keep him on the roster for a couple of years. For those who are really excited about this deal, he would have to play at the level he played at last year, maybe even better than that, for this contract to actually be like a value, for example. So it's going to be tough to get that out of him, I think.
And I know he made the Pro Bowl last year, Shayne, but I wouldn't read too much. I wouldn't put that much stock into it. I don't think that he's like a top 6 linebacker in the NFL or anything that way. In fact, I would put him, honestly, I think I would put him in the same tier that I put Cole Holcomb in last year in terms of linebacker plays go. Holcomb's obviously his biggest issue was staying on the football field. And we're seeing that now again.
Queen has never missed a game. I think that's a factor too. They expect him to be out there. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, and if he can, then he's already got a leg up on these other Steelers linebackers that couldn't stay on the field last year. I put this out there on Twitter as well, Shayne. I think, honestly, my favorite part of all of this, the Patrick Queen signing, is that you do not have to draft a linebacker early in a linebacker class that I am not fond with at all. Like, I like Peyton Wilson, who's 24 years old and has 3 ACL tears, is like my number one linebacker in this class. And I just don't feel comfortable with any of these guys. And so I'm at least relieved that you do not have to look like, oh, Steelers got to draft a linebacker in the 2nd round or something like that. You don't have to worry about that anymore. The position is at least solidified enough for now where you've got that pair of starters now with Queen and Roberts. We'll see what they do in terms of depth. Obviously, you could certainly stand to add some depth there, and maybe they will. They have enough draft capital. They could want to spend a 4th round pick or something on that. They could, but at least we'll probably steer them away, I would assume, from going linebacker early in the draft. Let's move on, Shayne, and we will talk about the Diontae Johnson trade. This one, I don't want to say I was caught off guard because I've been writing about it a lot. And as soon as those rumors came out, like, it didn't surprise me. Like, I think this guy was in the doghouse with the Steelers. Still, like, there's that moment of shock when you see it done, like, okay, this is actually happening now. And when they didn't release the value, what the Steelers were getting in return, I was optimistic. I'm like, all right, maybe this is a decent, like, mid-round draft pick here. They got a late round pick swap, and you got a 28-year-old 5'10" corner who's been really up and down. I'm already trying to kind of giving away my thoughts on this trade right now before I even get to let you speak, Shayne, but I was not overly pleased with the draft capital, the overall return that the Steelers got in the Diontae Johnson trade. I think the Panthers honestly got the better end of this deal. And I know it wasn't going to work out. Like, he needed to go. He didn't fit Arthur Smith's offense. I don't think that Tomlin really wanted him around anymore with the attitude issues we've seen. There's the viral play of the fumble, like, landing right next to his feet, and Johnson, whether he saw it or not, he just doesn't care to finish the play. And so there was too much of that going on last year. But Johnson is a better player than Diontae Jackson. I don't have any doubt. I think that, and you look at Diontae Jackson's contract, I mean, the Steelers aren't saving any money. You save like $500K with this player swap, and then you move up like 62 spots in the draft. What do you make of that? Are you down on this deal like I am right now? Are you hopeful for more?
My biggest issue with it is that you didn't get a premium pick in any sense, right? You didn't get a third or even a fourth. And you take on a contract that, yes, they're probably going to rework it or do whatever, and it's not going to cost as much. So you're probably going to ultimately save money, whatever it is, right? But you got a worse player back than you sent out, and you created another need now. Like, I understand Arthur Smith's offense doesn't use a ton of receivers. Like, George is probably going to be the primary target on most downs. Maybe, hopefully, the tight ends get involved. You still need a number 2 receiver to handle the workload, and you still need a third receiver to do something. Right? We don't have any of those things right now, right? It's just, this is one of those deals where it's like, I would have rather just said no. Just said, you know what? I know Diontae's not the best fit, but he's a better player. If we're not going to get value for him, why bother trading him? Let's just we're already trying to do stuff to compete this year. Clearly you're all in on this year, like you always are every year pretty much. Getting rid of a really good player, despite his flaws at times and issues you've had with him, for this return, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, I don't even think it really changes their need at corner. Like, Diontae Jackson might be a good player for a year here. I don't know if he should even be the second corner, though, realistically. He's probably better as a fourth corner, as a dime back. Like, that's probably what his value is in the NFL. For him to be the second corner, it's fine. He's done it for a long time. He's just never been great. Right? Like, he's just never been an above average corner. And, when you have nobody at corner, maybe having someone who might barely be average is fine, but it still doesn't really change my opinion that they need to add another outside cornerback. It doesn't change my opinion that they need now a receiver, right? It just creates another need, basically. That's kind of my ultimate issue with it.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I don't think that the corner is far from being a solidified position here. You've got Joey Porter Jr.
Change almost anything.
Great as your left corner. I don't know how Diontae Jackson's going to be here. If he is your starter next year, you still have a hole at slot corner. And it's something that Diontae Jackson doesn't do, oddly enough. The guy is 5'10" and
I love if he could play
pounds.
Slot or played more slot before this. But
it's so odd because I know the guy is fast. He's blazing fast, but you're a 180-pound corner with 29.5-inch arms. You're like 4th percentile size-wise, and yet you played 5 snaps in the slot last year and 811 out wide. So it's according to Pro Football Focus. And so you have to wonder, like, does this guy even offer versatility? Like, if you do go to find another option as like a boundary cornerback, what's his role now? Do you pigeonhole him in being a slot guy, even though he did, I think, 22 snaps in 2022, 5 last year? Like, he just doesn't play the position. And so not only that, Shayne, but I think that his film has just been so. Like, he's got a lot of like bad games mixed in if you go back and watch his tape. And I just don't think that this is a fix. If anything, it's a 1-year fix, and it might not even be that. Yeah. The contract was bad too. Like, there's a report from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, I believe it was, who said that the Panthers were planning on cutting this guy.
Oh, he was definitely a cut candidate for sure.
And you can see why. Like, $10.5 million for a corner who is just a so player. Like, you could dump him, go get a different guy in free agency, and fill that void and net some positive money out of this. And it makes you wonder why were the Steelers so sold on getting this guy? Like, he doesn't seem like a fit with Porter. Like, they're polar opposites of each other. I think Diontae Jackson played like 85% in zone coverage last year. They rarely played man there in Carolina. Porter is like this press man, bump and run, long corner. Like they couldn't be more different that way. And I just don't understand the fit with the team. I don't understand why you asked for this in return unless this was part of the deal. Like, so when it comes down to it, if you're not getting much out of Jackson, then essentially you gave Diontae Johnson at least a solid starting wide receiver in the prime of his career. You gave him to the Panthers to move up 62 spots on day 3 of the draft. That is pick 178. You now have pick 178. It's a second overall pick in the 6th round of the draft. Like, it seems like somebody had to have had something else on the table out there. And I think they kind of forced the Steelers' hands. They know that he was going to be gone before that roster bonus kicked in on the 16th there. And so they didn't have a lot of choice here, Shayne, but it is a little bit disappointing, especially now we're 2 years removed from seeing the Steelers just fleece the Chicago Bears for the Chase Claypool deal. Like, we knew we weren't getting that. Teams have wised up and we weren't getting that for Diontae. But some were optimistic that a 3rd round pick. I said a 4th round pick. A 4th round pick would have pleased me in comparison to what they got.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the ultimate issue, right? Is like you trade away a guy who is a better player than Claypool for nothing, essentially. Like, I view Diontae Jackson as just filler in this trade, legitimately. Like, that's what it feels like. And, I hope he plays well for us. I'm sure he's going to be given every opportunity to, unless we draft somebody early. I just haven't seen it from him enough for me to be like, yeah, that could be the number 2 corner on a good defense. Like, I just don't think so. I hope so. But you're banking a lot on that happening when it hasn't been there for a while where he's been even that level. You, again, have to now find another receiver, or really 2 receivers just for this year, let alone, going forward into the future. There's been some rumors of like Ridley. We'll talk more about free agent signings, but I don't expect that to happen. So, like, I don't really know where they go here with some of their big needs still, and it just adds to those needs now.
Yeah, Shayne, and I think honestly, there's a case that to be made here that you would have been better just doing the pick swap, because if the Steelers would save that $10 million just from moving Diontae, you could invest that back into a corner. Then you can structure the deal the way that you want to. So if you give a corner a 3-year contract, you want to lower the first year cap number, whatever, it just works out even better financially for the Steelers not to take back Diontae Jackson in this. Now, again, I have no doubts that he's better than Levi Wallace. He's probably better than Patrick Peterson, a 34-year-old Patrick Peterson at this point. But that is still money. He's still taking up a good chunk of cap space, $10.522 million, I think it is his cap number this year. And with that money, you could have gone back into the free agency pool this year and grabbed a corner that you like better, maybe one that fit the scheme better, one that's not as injury prone as Diontae Jackson. And that's another element there too. The guy has had some major injuries. And so I think that was just the only way they could get the deal done, honestly. And so I can't call the Steelers the winner of this trade. We'll see how this thing plays out long term. I know a lot of people got mad at me for saying that on Twitter because they're like, "Oh, Johnson was cancerous. He had to leave." I understand that they had to leave. That doesn't mean that the Steelers are winners of the trade just because they were forced to get rid of him.
They didn't get, in my opinion, there's almost no chance unless whoever they draft at 178 is a contributor.
You need like a Nick Herbig type of draft pick there.
Unless you contribute early, I have I don't see an avenue to us being a better team because of this trade. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and the biggest factor that you already pointed out, Shayne, it creates 2 holes now. So we didn't have a hole at receiver before. You just needed a slot receiver. And yes, an eventual upgrade for Johnson. We knew that. Like, we knew that the guy was entering a contract year. The Steelers weren't going to re-sign him. He's not good enough to be a franchise tag player type guy, but it still would have given you 1 more year of a quality receiver. And now it's Pickens and it's Calvin Austin. And those are the receivers on your roster. I mean, you got Marquez Callaway, some other guys that just might not even make the team, just sitting there on like these 1-year deals. I'm not counting any of those guys. Boykin's a free agent. Haven't got him back. They cut Allen Robinson for good reason to save cap space. Like, this wide receiver core is suddenly the thinnest in the NFL. And you've got 1 legitimate starting receiver and a gadget player that I like that just hasn't proven anything. And I don't know if he will in Arthur Smith's offense. So it's scary. It creates a scary situation because you might have 2 big needs at corner with 2 or 3 big needs at receiver now as well. Yeah. And Shayne, I'm going to put it out there. I want to say it right now because I said it this morning. Do not count out the Steelers drafting a wide receiver in the 1st round with the 20th overall pick. I think it's very, very much on the table now that they have that big hole. If you look at, and I just want to point out one more thing before we move on to our next topic here. Look at what Arthur Smith did during his time with the Falcons over the past 3 seasons. He drafted Drake London with the 8th overall pick. He drafted Kyle Pitts with the 4th overall pick. Those were 2 guys there, Shayne, who were big skill players that fit what he wanted to do. And so I think that if Arthur Smith has some say in this offense, they're going to look for another one of those guys. And the Steelers already have. They spent formal combine visits on a Brian Thomas Jr. and an Adonai Mitchell and even a Roma Dunze, who won't be there, but maybe falls far enough the Steelers would consider, like, this is legitimate. Like, they have a lot of interest in getting one of these guys. So don't just automatically pencil them in for an offensive tackle. And this is the predicament that it creates here, Shayne, is now you could consider a wide receiver in the first, an offensive tackle, a center, a cornerback. Like, it's really a 4-way street here, and it's hard to say what they're going to do. But, man, you need to fill some of these needs before the draft.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can talk about some guys that they might be using or might be interested in by filling some of those needs here.
All right, let's get to that. Let's talk about right now the scouting trail. Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan were at Georgia's Pro Day alongside Arthur Smith and Tara Lawson, offense and defensive corners. They brought the whole house, and is to be expected. They do this for Georgia and Alabama. Those are about the 2 schools they do it for every single year, sometimes Clemson, a few others in there. It's a great indication that, first of all, they love Georgia's football program. We knew that. They drafted 2 Georgia players inside the first 3 rounds last year.
Who doesn't?
So don't be surprised if they pick from this school a time or 2 again this year. Like, they just love Georgia players. Now, before we dive into this, Shayne, I do want to point out, and I think it's notable, Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan were not on hand to see Jackson Powers Johnson at Oregon's Pro Day. Some people will say, well, we can't follow the same trends as we did in the past, or it was free agency was just opening up. There was too much going on. That could be the case. It could be the case. However, Shayne, I will say, until I see this history broken and the Steelers move on from these trends that they had with Tomlin and Colbert, I'm not willing to say that it doesn't mean anything. Like, historically, and even if you just use Mike Tomlin, like, Tomlin has to be there to see these guys at their pro day, or you don't have a chance of being a first-round pick. Like, that's just the way that it has been. And Tomlin has such a big hand in the draft process now. I don't see that changing. Now, what can save JPJ essentially is if he gets that in-house visit from the Steelers, that'll at least put him on the map. It'll go against trend if they draft a guy that they didn't meet with, that their brass didn't meet with at the pro day, but it will at least put him on the radar there. But so we can say that about Jackson Powers Johnson. What we can say, though, about like Amarius Mims, he's very much on the radar now that Steelers brought the house to go see him here.
Another guy that I think needs to be on the radar for them in the first round, weirdly enough, and I wouldn't love this because he would technically fit, but only really if you don't use Freiermuth the way I would want them to use him. Apparently, Bowers was getting a talking to from Arthur Smith, and I don't think he's going to fall quite that far. Mm-hmm. But if he's in range and maybe they like him as a weapon more than maybe the receivers, I could see it. But again, I think that would mean that Freiermuth has to either be gone or isn't going to have a role, because those two would essentially ideally play roughly the same role as like that slot move tight end type, which isn't really like it's used in his offense, but not in the way that I would want them to use him. So that would be an interesting fit, but I wouldn't be shocked about that either. But especially Mims, I would say is the one you have to look at here in the first round.
Yeah, Bowers is so intriguing to me. Like, I've loved this guy since he came in as a freshman, just so explosive.
Very
I think that's a bit of a luxury. Obviously, you're not going to take the guy off the field. He'll essentially be a wide receiver for you.
He would essentially be a receiver.
Chew up yards after the catch. And so I'm a huge Brock Bowers fan. I don't know if I'm a big enough fan that I'd be willing to trade up a significant amount of draft capital to go get him or not. But it's at least worth noting, because those are really the 2 first-round prospects you're talking about at Georgia's Pro Day. It's Amarius Mims. It's Brock Bowers, who's going to go before Mims, I would have to assume. And outside of that, you're looking at more of like the day 2 type guys, some day 3 guys in there. Kamari Lassiter's the corner, who the Steelers could consider on day 2. They've got a couple safeties that are going to be drafted in the mid rounds here. And so, and another guy is that I really like in this draft is Ladd McConkey. I don't think he fits it necessarily what the Steelers want to do anymore.
No, unfortunately,
based on their visits so far, Shayne, and just knowing Arthur Smith and the receivers he's had in his offenses, he's going to want these big, like 6'2", 210 plus pound receivers that can block really well. That's not McConkey's profile at all, but I do love his tape.
Yeah, I love McConkey's tape too. I think he's wide receiver 6 for me right now, I think is where I have him
Mhm.
listed, which is much higher than a lot of people probably expected him to land once we got to this point. But he's so explosive. He honestly, the comparison, I think the easiest one for me to make is Diontae Johnson, which is probably why he won't be a
Mhm.
Steeler, right? Even though I love that skill set, I think it isn't the best fit for what we're trying to do offensively. So I think somebody, some other SEC receivers might be a better fit that we'll probably talk about later on, not today, but in other shows as we go along. But yeah, great player. I think a lot of their players are really going to be good from this class. I think Tyke Smith would be an interesting slot option in the mid rounds. He graded out very well as a slot. Now he doesn't have a ton of speed, not the most explosive guy, but a really good tackler, really physical, like kind of almost like a Mike Hilton-esque type of skill set, which as
Mhm.
Steelers fans know, we were kind of missing that since he's been gone. It's not been quite the same without him at slot. So definitely a lot of guys to be paying attention to here.
Yeah, and they produce NFL talent as good as well as any school out
Just
there, and
about, yeah.
so and I would be remiss as well if I didn't mention Cedric Van Pran, Georgia's
Yes,
center, obvious
center, yeah.
because of the need for it. The Steelers fans are obviously familiar with Van Pran. I think this guy, I'm not as high on him as a lot of people are. I know he's sliding down draft boards a little bit. I'm thinking more of like a third, fourth roundish type of pick at this point, and we'll see where he ultimately ends up. But
Right.
I can't rule that out as well with the guys being on hand there. Now, the biggest thing that this indicates, though, Shayne, is it firmly puts Amarius Mims, that's the big one, in the first round discussion because he checks those boxes now. And if he gets that in-house visit, we haven't heard anything by the time of this recording about it. A dinner meeting, that's another one that we always look for as well. It's what Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson had last year. It's why I pegged those two guys as the top candidates for the Steelers. They ultimately went with a trade up for Broderick. I think that will be a big indicator. So keep an eye out for those things. And we'll break down this scouting trail obviously more. We've got bigger fish to fry right now, Shayne, with so
We
much going
do.
on. The Still Curtain podcast is running a deposit match promotion up to $100 for any new Sleeper Daily Fantasy user. Make sure you use code FANSIDED2 when signing up to receive your deposit match. Please remember to always game responsibly. Scan the QR code on the screen to see if you qualify. All right, Shayne, let's shift gears here for a second. We'll backtrack because we did not get a chance to record a show between this time today and this time last week. And so we need to talk about Russell Wilson. Like, this is the
Yeah.
biggest move the Steelers are going to make, whether you like it or not, because it's the quarterback position and nothing matters more than
Yeah.
that in the NFL. And so I want to get your thoughts on what you make of this move. I've seen a lot of people on both sides of the fence here. They're like, all right, we're doomed because we've got a 35-year-old quarterback who's had 3 straight down years and he just offers no upside. It's not going to be enough for the Steelers to get there. And on the other hand, I see people being like, wow, 1.2 million veteran minimum. Like, this is the best sign that you can make. You get a 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback coming in and instantly upgrading the position. Are you somewhere in the middle of those two thoughts, Shayne, or where are you with this?
I think I'm definitely closer to the middle just because. So here's what I'll say. I acknowledge that it is a very much a bargain, right? Getting
Yeah.
any quarterback that is starting caliber-esque is what I'll describe it as for 1.2 million is a steal, right? It just is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's no downside to this in terms of like money impact on the future. None of that is a problem. The main issue is that this is just another attempt for the Steelers to remain competitive at all costs, even if competitive doesn't mean anything more than maybe making the playoffs and then putting up a fight in the first round. I think their ceiling changes basically nothing at all. Like, nothing changes for them in terms of outlook for this year. They might win an extra game here or so that maybe, because Wilson is probably a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett. I say probably because I'm not convinced about that at this point. That's kind of where I'm at on Russell Wilson. The main problem with it for me actually is the fact that there might not be a worse scheme fit for Arthur Smith in the league than Russell Wilson. If you look at what Smith has wanted to do and asked of his quarterbacks over the past 4 years, it is throw the ball in the middle of the field at a very high rate. Russell Wilson was the worst quarterback at throwing in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of the field last year by a significant margin, not only in terms of success rate, but in terms of percentage of throws to that area of the field. Unless Smith is going to change his offense fundamentally or ask different things with the quarterback, I don't think either quarterback was going to be a great fit, but especially Wilson is certainly not. And so he still has the great deep ball. He still moves around well for his age. There's things about his game that I don't hate, but he's just so limited as a player at this point in his career that I don't know what the point of this is other than just them not wanting to throw Kenny Pickett back out there. If it's truly just about not wanting to let him have another shot, that's fine. Like if you're at a point where you don't view him as a starting quarterback, I understand that. Like he hasn't given us a reason to think that really. But Wilson doesn't change anything about like their future, or especially this next year for me, other than maybe it gives you a slightly better chance against certain teams. But that's about it.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what Vegas thinks of it, Shayne,
Yeah,
the Super Bowl odds remain
they don't think of
exactly
it.
the same.
Yeah, they don't think of it at all.
They don't. It didn't never cross their mind that they
Yeah.
might lose millions if they don't change the odds. No, the odds stay the same. 80-1 odds to win the Super Bowl before, while Kenny Pickett was presumed starter, and then after Wilson was signed, 80-1 did not change one little bit. Now, I do think that there's I think there's a really solid chance the Steelers will finish like a 10-ish win team, make the playoffs, and then maybe get bounced again in the first round. I hope that they can do more than that, Shayne, but you talked about it. It's on paper, it's not a great scheme fit. Russell Wilson threw the ball 5.8% of the time
just
over the middle of the field. It was the lowest mark in the NFL by a mile last year. And I think in comparison, if I recall the number off the top of my head, these numbers came from The Athletic is what I saw. And so the number that I saw for Ryan Tannehill was like 17.8%, I want to say. And so you're like 3 times higher, like Ryan Tannehill's throw percentage across the middle field. It does matter. Like if you are going to, your game plan is going to be, we're going to run wide zone. We're going to do play action. You have got to be able to throw the ball over the middle of the field and do so effectively. And if Wilson's not willing to do it, and he's just too much like just creating on his own type of stuff, which is why he took 100 sacks over the past 2 years, then that could end up hurting the Steelers if they don't get a guy that's going to fit with the program here. Having said that, very little reserves that I think that Wilson is going to be an improvement over Pickett. I think his experience at the position, he's still accurate. He can still move pretty well. I think that he's going to offer some things to this team. And the best thing to look at, Shayne, is the price. Obviously, $1.2 million. You can't get any cheaper. That is veteran minimum there. But at the same time, if I would have told you, I was like, all right, Shayne, would you have signed this guy in free agency for $25 million for 1 year? If the answer is no, then it's like, did we just waste a year because we wanted to be cheap? Like I feel like that's almost how you have to look at it, because you want to get guy, like if you're going with an old quarterback, Russell Wilson's 35, going on 36 years old during the season. I think if you're going with the old quarterback, then you need a guy that you know is going to be a significant upgrade. And we don't know for sure that he will after watching him play 3 straight down years in the tail end of his career here. Everybody's going to look at the raw numbers here: 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Yes, the touchdown numbers twice as good as what Pickett has. I think it's a little bit fraudulent based on the game situation.
I totally agree. I think that the raw numbers make you go, okay, this guy is still productive. And he could be productive for us. I'm not even saying that like this offense is going to be dreadful now all of a sudden, because it's probably not going to be that great no matter who's playing quarterback, unless it was a premium player, right? If it was a Kirk Cousins being brought in, which we know the Falcons gave him a deal that the Steelers were certainly never going to give him. If you're going to bring in somebody like Justin Fields, who has more upside, but maybe isn't also the best fit in the world, like I get all that. And I know that it wasn't going to be this huge upgrade probably no matter what we did. But again, that doesn't that's what the issue is like, I just don't care. Like this doesn't do anything for me. Mm-hmm. I'm not moved. That's what I think I said to my friend when it happened. I was like, it means the same thing it would have meant anyway, that they're trying to remain competitive. They wanted an upgrade, didn't see an avenue to get that unless they spent more than they were willing to. So they settled for Russell Wilson. And I think that's okay, but it also just doesn't, I just don't care about it that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to describe it there. And I think we also have to look at, Shayne, I know hindsight is 2020 here, but it's like Justin Fields is still sitting out there. There are no suitors for him. Could you have gone for a day 3 pick is what it's looking like at this point. Probably. And so if that proves to be the case, like I'd probably rather gamble on the 25-year-old that still has legs and has improved every year rather than gone the other way. And you hope that I think it's a very small chance he ends up being a franchise guy, but at least there's a chance there to get a stable option at the position. I just don't, I think that this is a 1-year deal, no matter what with Wilson. Like, I don't think, even if he plays solid, I don't think you sign a 36-year-old to a multi-year deal after this.
No, and we have a couple comments here. This is the one that's most recent. Which one played in 2 Super Bowls and who hasn't even played in a playoff game? Again, that's fair. The problem is the version of Russell Wilson that played in 2 Super Bowls is very much long gone. He is nowhere near the player he was during that was like time.
A decade ago is the problem. Yeah, so
that's the issue, Jeremy. Like, I understand where people are coming from. I'm not even saying that it isn't going to be an upgrade, because it probably is, right? Especially over the quarterback play of God in the last 3 years or so. But the upgrade,
yeah, and let's put this to rest right now, Shayne, as well. Russell Wilson is the starter. It's not Kenny Pickett.
Oh, he's
it is Russell Wilson.
There's no way.
And so I've seen people argue, well, they still have to go through the battle. I'm like, there's no way that Russell Wilson is signing a veteran minimum contract with the Steelers before the legal tampering period starts, without a guarantee that this guy is starting for the Steelers this year. This is going to be their starting quarterback, it or not. And we're hoping that it's obviously a significant improvement over Pickett. And like I said, I don't think it's not a high bar to clear. Pickett has a 78.8 career passer rating, 5.8 yards an attempt, I think, adjusted. So Wilson is a better player. I just think that I don't know how much it moves the needle. And again, go back to the reason why I say that. Vegas doesn't like to lose money. And if they thought that they were going to lose money on you, they would increase the Super Bowl odds for the Steelers. They didn't care to do that. They're daring you to bet on the Steelers after Russell Wilson is signed, because they want to take your money. They want to take your money. So I don't think it moves the needle a lot. I think it maybe makes the Steelers a playoff win team as opposed to a bounced one and out team. I think that's potentially the only difference. And even then, maybe Wilson's got to be a lot better than he's been the last 2 years.
Yeah. And it depends on where they finish. Because if you have to go play the 2 seed, if you have to go play
if you're going to Buffalo or going to Kansas City,
Wilson's not changing the outcome of that game. He's not. Like, it just is. We're going to win that game because of the fact that our defense showed up or something, or it's going to be something along those lines. It's not going to be because Wilson took us there. It's just not going to be the case. Not the player he is anymore. And again, like, I think for the price, it makes total sense. It's just, again, if you care about this, if you view the signing as, okay, now we have a quarterback that can win playoff games, I just disagree with you. Like, I just don't think that's what we've gotten. And it's still better than what we've had. But you have to remember, like, no one, like, even Mason Rudolph, right, had a great last 3 games of the year. He threw 3 touchdowns in 3 games, like, to finish the season. This offense does not score points. Like, this was an offense issue. It's not just a quarterback issue. The quarterbacks did not help themselves, but this offense was just so dreadful put together that you could not throw touchdowns in this offense. Nobody could do it at a level above 1 a game, legitimately. That's going to change this year, I think, because the offense is going to be better. But if he threw 26 touchdowns last year, I probably won't even throw that many this year, even if he plays every game. Like, it's just because the offense just isn't built to do that. Like, it just is what it is. So that's what I have to say with that.
Yep. I totally understand that. And I think it does tell us a couple of things here. First of all, I think the Steelers are ready to turn the page on Kenny Pickett. I think they make that clear with this signing. He'll be, after this season, Shayne, he will be going into age 27 season in the final year of his contract after not playing well his first 2 years. Like, it just is not going to line up again. I think he's going to have to salvage that career probably on a different team after his rookie contract, if I had to guess. I know I'm getting ahead of myself here looking into the future, but what it also does, though, Shayne, is because this is a 1-year deal, you're probably not re-signing Russell Wilson unless he just goes out and just makes like a deep playoff run or something that way. You are looking at a quarterback in as early as next year's draft. And so I think that both of those things are probably safe to say at this point. So let's not be too hard on Russell right now. So I want to ask you, what does he offer this team then, Shayne? And so what are some of the positive things that he could potentially bring the Steelers?
Again, you talked about, he's a veteran in every sense of the word, right? He's always been very good with the media. He's always been very good with that aspect of things. Has pretty much what feels like a dedicated PR team that always is putting out good stuff about him. People will try to call him like fake or just like cringe or whatever. And there's some element of that for sure with him. But I do think he's generally a good guy. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with him as a person or as a player. It's just, again, like, I think he brings the experience element, which with Arthur Smith being brought in and having more of a true offensive coordinator that's been around a little bit, that should hopefully help him assimilate into the offense pretty easily. But at the same time, like, he's just such a limited player that I don't know if he can really do that. Like, I think you have to call an offense around what he does. And if Smith doesn't want to do that, and then he's been quoted about, like, if guys don't do what I want them to do, then we're going to get rid of them. We're going to get out of them. Like, I can see a situation where Russell Wilson refuses to throw those middle of the field throws and he gets benched at some point during the year. Like, just because of that. Like, if Tomlin's willing to do it. Like, it's just a weird fit that I think he brought value he brings value to the team, and he brings value as a quarterback. Just not enough where I'm like, okay, he's for sure going to elevate the offense in this way.
Yeah, and historically, though, Shayne, he has been a guy that is taking pretty good care of the football, and so I think that he might have a little bit left in the tank, and so I won't write him off completely. I think it's an upgrade over Pickett. I just think that it's probably going to put you in that limbo state again. I don't think that he's good enough there, and I think, again, if you were being really honest with ourselves, we rank him compared to all the AFC quarterbacks, I mean, he's still not in the top half. He's still probably a bottom 5 starting AFC quarterback. I think that's just the reality of it. We've got so many good ones and so many emerging ones, like CJ Stroud is in that discussion again already to jump up in that group because he had just such a phenomenal rookie year. And so it's hard. Like, it is a really stacked quarterback conference right now. I love the comments here from Jeremiah, and I love that we don't have to agree on everything.
No, we don't.
I think that's awesome. That's what makes us fans. And so, but I appreciate you chiming in there with those comments.
I hope you're right, by the way. We hope you are. I don't want to be right about this, but I'm not going to say what I don't think. That's the problem with this, is like, when you do a Steelers focused podcast as a Steelers fan, you have to be objective if you don't want to like be made fun of like everyone else is who does this, who just says good stuff. But like, I don't want this to happen. Like, I hope we win the freaking Super Bowl with him. Be awesome. Yeah. I just can't say that with any confidence, so I'm not going to. So.
No, and Shayne and I, we always try to evaluate as objectively as possible. We're not going to sugarcoat it for you. We're going to give you our straight shooting thoughts here of what we think. And so that brings us to our next question, Shayne. Were there better options for the Steelers to explore in free agency? Now, I will go, and I want to compare this real quick, because Jameis Winston went to the Browns for $8.7 million to be the backup. And maybe they need an insurance policy, because I'm not sold that Deshaun Watson's going to be there. Either that is that long-term guy and what they're going to do. That so just a debacle with that contract anyway, and he needs to be better. Mitch Trubisky got twice as much money going to be a backup on the Bills, and we saw Trubisky was, I don't know, bottom 3 quarterback that played football this year in the NFL. He was really, really bad. He jeopardized the Steelers' chances until Rudolph kind of got them back in right at the tail end of the season. And so those guys got more. Sam Darnold, 1 year, $10 million deal for Sam Darnold, who he's really never been a good quarterback. He's young. He's got that going for him. Doesn't really take care of the football and just hasn't shown a lot in his career. Like, in comparison, $1.2 million for Wilson is a really good deal, because you're getting a guy with a much better pedigree, body of work with them, who has the resume, who's won playoff games, who's won a Super Bowl, albeit, again, this is a while ago now, he's done these things. But for the price, I can get behind that if there were no better options. So the question is there better options, Shayne? I don't think the Steelers were ever even sniffing Kirk Cousins at that price. So it's like Fields and Russell Wilson, and is that it?
So my problem with it, so like, technically there are, in my opinion at least, there are better quarterback options out there. There were. Now, when you factor in price, you start to wonder if it's worth it, because it could have. Now, granted, they need to do more things in free agency for this to matter for the money wise, because they still have holes to fill and they need to figure that out. Let's say they don't spend all their cap and they end up having some leftover cap for whatever reason. Maybe they just can't get somebody to sign. Maybe there's nobody they want to sign, whatever. I think that Jacoby Brissett is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson is at this point. I'm just going to say that. It's not like a huge difference, but I think he's better. Now, he went to the Patriots and he's going to start for them unless they draft a rookie who starts immediately. I think Tyrod Taylor's better quarterback than Russell Wilson. I really do believe that. Like, at this point, I actually do. He's going to go be the Jets backup, assuming Aaron Rodgers doesn't go become the vice president candidate for whoever it was that I keep hearing about. That's a whole other thing. I'm glad I don't follow the Jets. I'm going to put it that way. I think he's better. I think that Justin Fields is a more impactful quarterback. He might not be better at actually playing it, but I think he has more of an impact on the field, honestly, because of his legs and things he can do. Now, granted, these are things you would have had to pay more money for, more assets for. So again, it might not have been the same value, but it would have been a better option, in my opinion. So that's kind of the issue.
Yeah, Shayne, you woke up ready to fight today. You got your Duke stuff and everything. You're going to ruffle some feathers with that, but I don't necessarily disagree. I think it's hard to argue that he
played good football last year for the Giants when he was healthy. Health is a problem, so it's like, I get that, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, and all these guys have their issues, obviously. But I feel like it's hard to argue that like Wilson was like a clear tier above these guys. Now, again, I really, really caution fans, and I always do, against just being a box score checker. And when you look at Russell Wilson last year, you see 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 98.0 passer rating. That's good stuff. Good. On paper, it is. But a lot of this came in garbage time. A lot of this came when the game was well out of reach. I mean, if you recall, they got just massacred at times last year. And so you have to put everything into context as well. And I don't think that the play was as good as a lot of fans think that it was. And I think that the tape will confirm that if you take the time to go back and look at it. Having said that, I'm hoping that maybe a better situation in Pittsburgh, if it proves to be better, and if he proves to be at least somewhat, can work as somewhat of a fit with Arthur Smith, then it can be more efficient and better than it was these past 2 years. And so we need to see that trend, that direction. And again, the bar is low. The bar with Trubisky and Pickett and Rudolph, it's been really, really low for a while now.
It should be better.
And I just broke that down. Like the last 5 years, it's been really rough. And you had like a year of Ben mixed in there after his elbow surgery, and you had Duck Hodges and Rudolph and all these guys. I'm like, there were no good options since like 2019. So like 1 year in between there was a solid Ben year, and that was it. And so we're hoping that we get the best that we've seen maybe since like a 2018 season with the Steelers, something like that.
Which I think is totally possible for sure. Yeah.
I think it certainly is. And so at the very least, Shayne, we have something different to look forward to. It's going to be different this year. We can phrase it that way at least. Yeah. All right. If you are the fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. All right, Shayne, let's talk about what's next for the Steelers in free agency. And as we're recording, I mean, there could be stuff coming in already. Obviously, we don't know everything that's going to happen here, but let's just give our assessment based on the things that we do know right now. Positions the Steelers must target next. And there are several out there. Obviously, they have got to fill some of these holes. You cannot wait until the NFL draft. You will absolutely, if you do, you'll pigeonhole yourself into taking a position, and you will reach for a position of need if the value doesn't line up. And I hate doing that. That's what they did in 2016 with Artie Burns. It's what they did in 2018 with Terrell Edmonds. It's what they did in 2019 when they were forced to trade up for Bush because they're like, there's only 2 linebackers in this class we need a linebacker. Don't do that. The free agency is for filling holes. The draft is for taking cornerstone players, the best players at the most important positions. Seems simple, but teams overthink it all the time because they have a hole. Let's fill these holes, at least with a baseline level player, so that you don't feel the need to reach. So where are these positions the Steelers must address now?
I think safety is still very much a priority. I think that getting someone in the building next to Minkah, allowing him to play more of the role that you want him to play, that's something that needs to happen. And there's still a lot of safeties have gone, but I know Jordan Whitehead just went back to the Bucs. That would have been a guy I would have been interested in as kind of like a strong safety. But there's safeties out here. Justin Simmons is probably a pipe dream, probably going to get a decent contract somewhere. But you have guys like Quandre Diggs that got released by the Seahawks. He's had a really good run as a safety the last few years. Maybe not quite the same player anymore, but for a year or two, I think it'd be really good. Julian Blackmon of the Colts is more of a free, but he could certainly be there as one of the safeties that has a little bit of versatility. Like there's guys there in the secondary, like the corner too. Like I think Fuller is probably too much. I think he's going to get a decent contract because he's still not too close to being like over the hill. I think you can get another couple good years out of him. Stephon Gilmore kind of feels like he's done, in my opinion. Like I don't know if I want to, sign him. But secondary is definitely a big thing. I think interior defensive line is still an issue. Like I know they've kept Larry so far, but if they are going to keep him, I think you need to find a true nose to play. And DJ Reader's still out there. Still another player from a division rival in free agency. Would not hate that. I don't know what his price is going to be. I don't know what that people are looking at. I know Stewart got $13 million per, and I think that Reader's a little bit older than him, I want to say, or close to the same age, something like that. So maybe they get similar contract. That might be a little too rich, but something either in the secondary or the defensive interior would be big for me. And then receiver now you have to talk about too, because Diontae is gone. You expect them to address that in the draft now, like you talked about, maybe very early in the draft. But all those positions, especially, I think still need addressed.
Yeah, Reader's interesting. I think that would fill a hole that the Steelers really haven't had that type of player in a really long time, and they've been missing that anchor in their run defense like that. The positions you mentioned, obviously, Shayne, center is out there as well.
Center feels like something they're looking at the draft at this point, though, because like they've really let a lot.
I don't want that to be the case. Like, I know. The problem is
Coleman Shelton of the Rams is a guy that's still out there. I like.
There's another one.
Yeah, that's one.
I mean, my guy all along was Connor Williams. I know he suffered.
I don't know if he's gonna. Yeah, I don't know.
And you got to throw some money on. He's the second-rated center in the NFL before he left. He worked well in Mike McDaniel's wide zone offense. He can move. He's athletic. He's big. So his issue has always been staying healthy. So that's the one I would look to. And we'll see. I mean, he might go somewhere real soon here. As of recording this, I mean, he's still available. That's one position there. And then talk about wide receiver. Like, I really want to go the draft route. I really, really do. I think that this is a great wide receiver class. I know we'll talk about this more in our later shows here, but I am perfectly fine with drafting 2 receivers this year and spending cheap in free agency. Just get a guy. Like, honestly, I would have loved the Matt Collins deal. We get 1 year, $3 million for the Bills. Like, that's the type that I wanted. He can do all your special teams gunner stuff for you. He can block out there. You need the guy that blocking in route. He's like an upgraded Miles Boykin, can do all those things and offers a little bit more, at least on offense, than what Boykin does. That's the type of receiver that I wanted to get, just to kind of solidify the position a little bit. Doesn't offer much on offense, but I know they're going to go the draft route anyway. And so I hate spending. I don't want to overpay for one of these receivers out there, a Tyler Boyd or whoever ends up being, and just not getting your value, not getting your return on that, probably knowing that the Steelers are drafting a receiver inside the first 2 rounds this year, based on their visits and how things are heading right now. And that guy is going to be playing more probably than the guy that they sign. And so I just don't want to waste money at that position unnecessarily. I do want to get it covered so that you don't have to do something in the draft. But I do think that that's one to look at. And then you need a slot corner as well. Like, unfortunately, there is no evidence that Diontae Jackson can play the slot. And so, I mean, they need both, really. You need another outside corner as well, because I just don't trust that position yet. But you really have got to find your version of Mike Hilton now. You need that guy that can defend the run, that can cover the short to intermediate stuff. That guy hasn't existed really for a while now, since they decided that Cameron Sutton was a boundary cornerback instead of a slot, where he's better inside anyway. And so, which is easy to see by the way he profiled, but they do need to find a slot corner as well.
I think in the draft, there's a ton of slots I like. So, like, I'm hoping that they address that in mid rounds if they don't sign a slot corner. So at least there's somebody there that I think can play it. But, I've talked about Daquan Hardy to you a bunch, and he had a really good combine. I'm going to be watching his pro day here on the 15th too. Like, I'm hoping that they can address that in the draft, because, there's guys out there that you can go get, but like Kenny Moore is kind of the guy that I think you could have afforded to spend that much money on. It'd have been worth it. And you got $10 million a year, which set the market for slots, which I'm still amazed. Like, I know that there's guys who play slot defender who aren't technically corners, so the market's a little bit skewed. But in terms of pure like slot corners, the fact that the market's capped at $10 million is a little bit crazy to me, considering how valuable they've become. And I think the league is still kind of catching up with that. Where, the guard market exploded. Congrats to all those guys. I mean, Robert Hunt, $100 million man, good for him. But like, I think the corner market, specifically slot, is definitely interesting to see the next couple of years. So,
yeah, I think for sure. And so I guess we'll find out what they're going to do here. I think that this is going to give us a lot of things to look forward to in terms of the draft, Shayne. And so where they go with the last of their money here in free agency, what positions they fill, and we're going to have a really, really good idea. And then after that, Shayne, it's going to be all scouting trail stuff for us. We're going to be kind of tracking where these guys are going, predicting picks here. And I'm going to be doing a lot more film watching in between. I've already logged quite a few hours, and I went through all the tackles and receivers again for like the 3rd time. And so it's a really good tackle class. It's a really good receiver class. I said that, I think, on last week's show. I don't want Steelers missing out on those draft classes. Like, I honestly think if you were to go like tackle 1st round, receiver 2nd round, like, you're going to get a really good 1-2 punch there to open up the draft. I've all along, though, I just want the Steelers to draft where the talent lines up, and not have to reach for need. And so, like, there's only a couple cornerbacks that I would consider with that pick for the Steelers. I think there's 3 guys that I would draft there. And this is for a later date, but I think that it's really important that they get a lot of these needs filled in free agency. Any other thoughts that you wanted to share on free agency or anything that we talked about before we sign off today, Shayne?
There's one other player that I thought of, but I'm very curious what his market is, because he hasn't signed yet. Cam Curl from the Commanders. Had a bit of a down year for his standards, but he's a great strong safety type for me. I think he'd be great playing with Minka, but that's another guy that, like, I don't know what his money he's looking for is. So we'll see.
Yep, I know that's safety is certainly a position that they're going to have to address here. And I said before, I'd be fine with not only cutting Keanu Neal, which is yesterday's news, but with KZ as well. Like, I just think it's just a position that needs upgraded. So I expect them to do something there soon. If you guys have any other thoughts about what the Steelers should do in free agency or any of the things we talked about in today's show, please drop a comment down below. Shayne and I would love to get to those, and we'll get that conversation rolling here.
I saw Mike Williams got cut too, officially, by the Chargers.
Okay, I wondered if that was coming. It looked
like
I
expected. He felt like the guy that was going to get cut, and then maybe Mack or Bosa still to go, maybe in a trade, possibly. So
Yeah,
Chargers
they were in a
have to,
rough way financially
yeah,
for sure.
they got an hour and a half.
Williams is interesting because I wonder if there would be some interest on the part of the Steelers there because of his
Maybe. I don't know
profile. But
I don't know how much he's gonna ask. I mean, he's gonna get paid
I
some
don't know.
money for the Chargers, but
It seems honestly to me it feels too similar to what you have in Pickens that I
yeah,
think you need to go a little bit different than that. But
probably.
we'll save that for next week's show, and I'm sure by this time next week we'll have a lot more new information.
Hopefully,
We'll be able to narrow down that pick a little bit more. So
Hopefully.
stay with us. We go live every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube, and so thank you for joining us today on the show. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.